Okay. All right. Chapter 7, chapter 8. Don't forget the commentaries that the elders, bought for everybody. Please read ahead, if you will. Read your Bible first and read the commentary. Chapters 7 and 8 go together. They're both at the Feast of Tabernacles. They sort of go together, in my opinion, like chapters 3 and 4. How do 3 and 4 go together? Do y'all remember? John, you do.
Nicodemus and the woman at the well, but there's a contrast.
Okay, the contrast between Nicodemus and the woman, at the well. Do you remember who gave us chapters?
Some man.
In the 1500s? A guy named Langton, Langton. We don't necessarily agree with Mr. Langton, but we're stuck. Who gave us verses? A fellow by the name of Stephanus. We don't necessarily agree with all of that, but we're stuck. Okay? I know you needed that piece of information. Okay, so chapters 7 and 8 go together, and excuse me. This is at the Feast of the Tabernacles. After these things, Jesus walked in Galilee, for he did not want to walk in Judea because the Jews sought to kill him. A lot of people are not aware of it, but you could leave Galilee and go to Judea or vice versa, and then the authorities, in one area, could not get you in the other area. What do you think about that? They had two different, authorities. I mean, the Romans had jurisdiction, over all of it. But at any rate, so Jesus moves, you'll see, from one place to another, as sort of as the need, as he needed to. And so we got him in Galilee. All right, where was he in Judea? Where was he in, Galilee. He did not want to walk in Judea. Okay, where was he in chapter 6? He was at Capernaum, correct? The first part of the chapter, he was on the east side of the Sea of Galilee at what we call the Golan Heights. Okay, you remember that? And that's where he fed all the people. Then you remember he told the disciples to get in a boat, that's Mark's account, and to go to Capernaum. And he joined them, in the night. And that was another one of the great miracles, right? The walking on the water, okay? And so he's kind of traveling around. Jesus was an itinerant preacher. He didn't have a local church, as it were. And so he's walking around. The word walk there is an interesting work. He's traveling, here and there. Okay, the Feast of the Tabernacles was at hand. Okay, I call this chapter Jesus the water of life. Chapter 6 was Jesus the bread of life. And then chapter 8 is going to be Jesus the light of the world. Now, I said these two chapters go together because both of them are at the Feast of Tabernacles. But there's two basic themes going on. Chapter 7 is about water. Chapter 8 is about light. Okay, 8:12 and 9:5, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. In this chapter, nowhere does Jesus say, I am the water of life. But he does say, if anyone's thirsty, let him come to me and what? And drink. That's verse 37, I think. Okay, now, another thing to remember about this chapter and chapter 8 is there were two ceremonies that took place. And in my study of John, when I've sat at some of the feet of other people, I don't remember in church or wherever they ever talking about this. And it's so significant. In chapter 8, there was the water ceremony. This feast would last. It's disputed whether it's 7 days or 8 days. I think it's an 8-day feast. But for the first 7 days, the priest would go to the pool of Siloam with a pitcher. And they would take water, and then they'd have a procession to the temple, and they'd pour it at the altar. And in that procession, they would be reading passages like Psalm 118. Okay? And it was really a big deal. Okay, on the last day of the feast, Jesus stands up, and let me back up. The last day of the feast, they didn't have the ceremony, of the water. Now, let me back up again. Why did they have the ceremony of the water? Because of what the Feast of the Tabernacles is about. It celebrates what?
Harvest.
Okay, all right. What else?
Waiting to go into Canaan.
Okay, when they were wandering in the wilderness, where did they dwell?
Desert.
They were in the desert, but they dwelt in what? In tents or booths. Okay? I don't say that word very well, but anyway. And so during this time, they would dwell in tents, during this feast. Okay? And it would commemorate God's protection of them all through, the wilderness wanderings. Okay? And as Jenny points out, it also had something to do with harvest and so forth. It was one of the big three. What were the big three on feast? Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles. Who was required to go?
Men.
All male members were required to go. Okay? So it's a big deal. I mean, they came from, all over the country. So the water ceremony has to do with God's providing them water, in the wilderness. And then, so they're thanking God for that. They're commemorating, God's protection of them, throughout wandering in the wilderness. And what I find so significant about this is this. On the last day, Jesus stood up. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm just trying to give you a sort of an overview. I hope it helps a little bit. Most time teachers sat. The Bible says Jesus would go to the temple and he'd sit and teach. But on this day, he stands up and shouts out, "If anybody's thirsty, let him come to me and drink." So what have they been thinking about the whole week? They've been thinking about water the whole week. And so Jesus capitalizes on that particular theme. And no wonder we call him the master teacher, right? Just think about it. And so in chapter 6, what does he do? He feeds the 5,000, and what does he end up saying? As I'm falling apart up here. What does he end up saying? I am the, what? Bread of life. Okay, in chapter 4, when he is trying to reach the Samaritan woman, and he does, what was she interested in? Water. What does Jesus say? I'm here to give you living water. If you drink of it, you'll never thirst again. So notice how Jesus picks up on themes. And I've tried to tell my students that, over the years, also, try to pick up on themes, in your neighborhood or in your part of the world. I mean, if you're going to preach in the Bronx, which I've never done, but I doubt if the parable of the sower would go over very well. Right? I mean, really, I wouldn't think so. But it's going to go over quite well here, because people know in the springtime, they know about getting the garden ready, and all that kind of stuff. All right, got any question about any of that? This feast is called the Feast of Ingathering. It's called the Feast of Booths, and it was around September and October. And I found this statement of Josephus, the greatest and the holiest feast of the Jews. So it's a big deal, okay? So 3 parts. Jesus is going to go to the feast, he's going to teach at the feast, and then there's going to be a reaction to his teaching. And that pattern is really kind of throughout, his discourses, isn't it? Okay? Now here's the big 3. The Passover, it was the oldest Jewish feast, and it was around the 1st of April. Feast of Pentecost, and it was late May, early June. What we usually say something about 50 days relative to to Pentecost. What do we say? 50 days after Passover, okay? And then Feast of Tabernacles, okay? And as I said, you can see here, last days, I said I got lasted 7 days. But you can look in your commentary and you can see where that's kind of disputed. I believe that there was an 8th day. So the 7 days may be, when they mention that, it might be because of the ceremony that they had, each day. But on the 8th day, they didn't have a ceremony. Okay, but here's a passage that I found that's really insightful. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place that he will choose, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and the feast of booths. Deuteronomy 16:16. Now, where's Passover? Passover's not mentioned there. Okay, the feast of Passover and the feast of unleavened bread are really frequently sort of lumped together. Because you had the Passover, which lasted how long? When did it start? When did their day start? See, we're on Roman time, we start at midnight, right? They started at 6 o'clock in the evening. That's kind of weird, to me. So the Last Supper, we will say was Thursday night, but it was actually Friday morning. It's kind of weird. So I always say, we know it as Thursday night. And then Jesus was crucified, on Friday. And that's another thing we got to dig into, because Mark says the 9th hour, John says the 6th hour. Oh no, we need to just give up the faith. We got a contradiction, right? Not by a long shot. Okay, here's something I found. I wanted to show you about this ceremony. This is an artist's conception, but here we've got the blowing on the trumpet, and we've got them walking here. They've got palm leaves and let's see, I forgot right off about the palm leaves. That was kind of like like what's Tennessee's? Being from Mississippi, all I can think of is the state bird's mockingbird, and the state flower or whatever is magnolia. What is it in Tennessee? Iris. What about the bird? A crow? Crows are eating me out of house and home. What? Oh, hush. Y'all stole it from us. Huh? Okay. You were state first. Okay. All right. So anyway, I think the palm has some kind of nationalistic, significance, with the Jews. Okay, so there's your real picture. I don't have a lot of slides to show you on this, so we'll just leave it there. Okay, let's dig into these brothers. All right. So the Feast of Tabernacles was at hand. His brothers said to him, "Depart from here and go into Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you are doing. For no one does anything in secret while he himself seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." For even his brothers did not believe in him. Okay, that takes us through verse number 5. Now, the brothers initially did not believe in Jesus, correct? They eventually did. How do we know that? The brothers were James, Joseph, Simon, Judas. Is that right? Yeah. Well, they're all together in the room in Acts chapter 1. The brothers are there. And so I think the assumption is that they became believers, but they're not believers, at this point. Okay, so what are they saying? Depart from here and go into Judea, that your disciples may see the works that you're doing. All right, what is the context? What happened in chapter 6? The end of the chapter. What happened to all of the disciples, temporary disciples, John? They left. They took off. They got out of Dodge. They found out that Jesus was not a gravy train. That's what they really wanted. They just wanted food. Okay? I told you about the welfare system of the Romans. I think it was don't hold me to this, but I think it was like 320,000, people on help from the Romans. Don't hold me to that number. I'd have to go back and look it up. But so they saw Jesus as just another person, who can come along and provide for them. But then when they found out that that was not what he was about, what did they do? They took off. Okay? So with that background, listen to what the brothers are saying. Go into Judea that your disciples may see the works that you're doing. They're essentially saying, well, you didn't win any disciples over, when you fed, the thousands of people. You didn't get any disciples then. So what are they saying? You need to go to another place and you need to hang your shingle out. If you want people to believe in you, you need to get with it. You need to start advertising a little bit better. You see that? Have you thought about that before? You have? All of you had already thought about that?
No.
You had not. Who said that? Elena? Beth. Okay. Beth, what had you thought about before?
Well, I hadn't even realized where it said his brothers, so I read over this and not even caught that.
Okay. Well, it's his physical brothers, and there's a question as to whether they're being sarcastic or not. I kind of think, I sort of lean, toward the sarcastic, view, but there are scholars who do not, see it that way. But I do think that they're definitely saying you had a big loss in your campaign over there, with your narrative on the bread of life. You lost that day.
It's like they're saying, go try it somewhere else.
Yeah, go try it somewhere else. And if you want people to believe in you, you got to hang your shingle out. You got to advertise. So they're saying, get to the feast, boy, so you can, tell people who you are, do some of your mighty works and all of that. Merrill Tenney, who he wrote a little book called The Gospel of Belief in 1948, said this: perhaps the Judeans would be gullible enough to accept him even if the Galileans, in particular his own family, would not. The brethren felt that he should make an open bid for the kingdom. If he had any miracles on which he could trade, why not display them? Their level of thought was, it pays to advertise. See, they're strictly on a physical, level. You got to remember that throughout John. You got two levels. You got a horizontal level, that the disciples and many others are thinking on regularly, right? And then you got the vertical level that Jesus, is always, talking about. Who did I suggest that might have been the first person to see what was really going on about Jesus, and that he was really going to die? Who? Mary. I think it was Mary. What Mary? Mary Magdalene?
Mary, no, Martha's sister.
Martha's sister, Mary. Okay. There are several Marys. That was a very popular name. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. Now, notice verse number 6. Jesus said to them, my time has not yet come, but your time is always ready. The world can't hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I'm not going. New King James says, I am not yet going. Do some of you have a translation where it says, I'm not going? Leaves out the yet? Okay, some of you. It's disputed about that, and I won't go into that in great detail. Going up to the feast, for my time is not yet fully come. Okay, as soon as you read, my time is not come, that ought to probably make you think of something that we talked about earlier. All the way back to chapter 2. Yep, but what about the time? My time has not come. What happened? Brother Jonathan? Okay, what did he tell his mama? My hour has not yet come. So some people think that when Jesus says, my time has not yet come, that it's the same thing as my hour has not yet come. But I don't think that that's the case. My hour has not yet come always points to his death, his burial, his resurrection. Okay? When he talks about that. For example, in chapter 12, you remember when Andrew and Philip brought the Greeks to see Jesus? Well, we hadn't studied that, so you don't remember. Or you might remember from your personal study. But you remember then Jesus said, my hour has come. And see, that was just, a week before the, not even a week, I don't guess, but just anyway, a short period of time before his crucifixion. So what does he mean then when he says, my time is not yet come? Jesus, you want to remember, Jesus was always on a divine schedule. He was on the schedule that the Father had laid out for him. Okay? His brothers are not on any kind of schedule like that. And so, what time would be suitable to the brothers? Just any time. Any time would be suitable for them. But Jesus is saying, that's not suitable for me. Now what we're going to learn is Jesus ends up going to the feast, but he does not go. See, what you have to remember here is there are thousands of people that are going. I mean, whole towns turned out. A whole town would be vacated to go to the feast. But Jesus did not go, with the throngs of people. All right? So he waited till, what does it say, the middle of the feast, doesn't it? I just read it again yesterday and this morning. Where does it say that?
Verse 14.
Yeah, okay. So he goes in the middle of the feast. So see, people have already gotten there. They're already kind of settled in, and everything. And so Jesus does not make a big, fanfare of it. Because see, everybody's looking for him anyway. Is he going to come? Is he going to come to the feast? Have you seen him? All that kind of stuff. Okay? So Jesus is basically saying, I'm going to go on my divine schedule. All right, not going versus going. If you take not going, which is usually the renderings that are a little bit, excuse me, the renderings that are a little bit harder, in the original are typically taken, as the originals. The texts that are a little bit, more difficult, they typically are taken as closer to the original. And so the harder one is I'm not going. But as I said in here, you can argue for yet, since he does go. Excuse me. One of the problems is if you take the yet out and you say I'm not going, then later on he does what? He goes, and so see, that raises a question. And so in my judgment, if you say I'm not going, I think you have to understand that I'm not going the way you guys want me to go. You see what I'm saying? See, they want him to go ahead and get up there and hang his shingle out and advertise and so forth. But he's not going to go like that. But I sort of lean to the yet idea. I'm going, but I'm not going yet. I'm going to go a little bit, later. All right. So when he said these things, he remained in Galilee. When his brothers had gone up, then he also went up to the feast. Not openly, but as it were in secret. Oh, in secret. So what is that about? Do you know? What does it mean? He didn't want anybody to know he was going? That's verse 10, isn't it? Okay. He went to Jerusalem not publicly, rather than traveling with the usual caravan of pilgrims, which would have been very public. Jesus, presumably along with the 12, quietly slipped into the city without any fanfare. That's really what I already said, to you. Okay? All right. You had a comment? Anybody? Y'all awful quiet today.
If he had he was in the crowd, the effect of what he wanted to do would have been lost.
Wouldn't it, Jenny, it would have taken away from what he's really wanting to accomplish, namely to get people to come to him and to believe in him. That's what he does in verse 37.
No good service like wanting him to do signs and everything.
Right. Okay, now, there's a lot of dispute in this chapter concerning the identity of Jesus, and it starts in about verse 11 or so. Then the Jews sought him at the feast and said, "Where is he?" See, they're looking for him. We already learned earlier in the chapter that they sought to kill him, correct? And we knew that ever since chapter 5, verse 16. Remember I told you that at 5, 16, 17, 18, right in there, after that, there's hostility between Jesus and the Jews. Okay, verse 12, there's a lot of complaining among the people. That doesn't happen today, does it? Concerning him. Some said he is good. Others said no. On the contrary, he deceives the people. However, no one spoke openly of him for fear of the Jews. So, some people had witnessed his works, perhaps, right? And they said, if we're talking about the same fella, I think he's a good man. And then the others who still have hard hearts and so forth, they're going to say what? No, he's a deceiver. He's just a charlatan. He's just another one of these guys, trying to accumulate a following and so forth. Okay? So in the middle of the feast, Jesus went up to the temple and taught. And the Jews marveled, saying, "How does this man know letters, having never studied?" Now, it was characteristic of the Jews, to teach their children, wasn't it? All right. They were not astonished that he could read and write, because those skills were common among Jews, especially among whom of the Jews? Among the males. Okay? Sorry, ladies. And so they were astonished at something else, though. They were astonished at the knowledge that he continues to display, that they witnessed when he was just a boy. You remember that? According to, Luke, when he was teaching in the temple and he told his mama, "I must be about my Father's business." They were astonished then. They continued to be astonished, throughout for his teaching. And so what they're really saying is, we're not surprised that he can read and write. We are amazed that he is able, to have so much knowledge, about the law and so forth and so on, not having studied under some famous rabbi, or not having sat at the feet of some, particular teacher. See, the same thing was said of Peter and John. Do you remember that? Where was it? Acts chapter 4? Is that worth checking on? Y'all don't believe me, do you? Where does it says they were unlearned? I thought it was 4. Yeah, it's got to be. 5 is Ananias and Sapphira.
Chapter 4, verse 13.
4:13. They saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated and untrained men. So again, they were not saying that Peter and John, were never taught by their parents how to read and how to write. But how can they do, how can they, teach as well as they do, and they never have, been, trained people? Comment on that? Anything? Anybody?
Paul was probably one of the few.
Yes. It's no wonder. I've often thought of that, Jenny. It's no wonder God chose him to be, the minister to the Gentiles. I mean, Paul was like at the top. I mean, he knew, Greek. He knew, Latin, he knew Hebrew, he knew Aramaic. He knew the classics. He definitely had been educated very, very well. But not so much for Peter and John. What was their profession? Theirs about catching fish. Okay. All right. Anybody? All right. My doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. We see that over and over. I'll only call attention to 5:19 and following. The Son can do nothing of himself, but whatever he sees the Father do. Remember that? In 5:19, before he gives the 5 witnesses, he talks about what he does is what the Father has sent him to do. What he says is what the Father sent him to say. If anyone wills to do his will, he shall know concerning the doctrine, whether it is from God or whether I speak on my own authority. So Jesus spoke with authority, but he got authority from whom? The Father. What does Matthew 28:18 say? All what? Authority has been given to me. So authority was delegated from the Father to the Son. Authority was given to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit gave authority to the apostles, and the apostles spoke the word, and then they eventually wrote the word. So we have right here the authority in the big book, right? The good book. I shouldn't say big book. Some of you know the background of that language. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. The big book that was written. Or, okay. You hadn't been in any of those groups, I guess. Okay, well, that's good. I've been in those groups. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Jill. You're not anonymous in the group, so, because they go around the room and they, hello, my name is David and I'm an alcoholic, and so forth. But I had to go through all that when I did that master's degree in counseling with emphasis in addictive disorders. So I had to take a lot of group counseling. Anyway, what about this statement, if anyone wills to do his will? I kind of like that. If anyone wills to do his will. What is that saying? If somebody wants to come to Christ, if they really want to come, do you think a way can be made possible for them to come? What do you think, Miss Jill? If whosoever will. I mean, if you will to find out knowledge, I can't help but think of Cornelius in Acts chapter 10. Here was a man who was a good man. He was a devout man. He was a religious man. His prayers even went up to God. He wanted to know the truth. He was walking in the light that he had. Let's just throw that out there just for a second. Were the prayers of Cornelius heard or not? They were, weren't they? Well, was he a Christian? Well, Acts 11:14 says Peter went to him to tell him words whereby he could be saved. So are you saying then that prayers of non-Christians can be heard?
I think all prayers can be heard.
Yeah, they're all heard, of course, because God hears everything, right? But
He knows your heart, and if you're honest, you have an open and honest heart, and you're seeking, God's going to help you find a way.
yeah, I believe that. So, as I just said, Cornelius walked in the light that he had, but his attitude was, I want more light. You see, I'm searching. And I think, didn't the Lord say something like, if you seek, then what? You will find, Jenny? Yeah, Ethiopian. Yeah, he's reading Isaiah the prophet. He went to Jerusalem to worship. He was wanting to do right. All right, anybody? He who speaks, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I like the fact that in your commentary you use the term that if someone's willing, then he will not complain about complain about the things that are required of him to do. He'll just humbly do them.
if he's willing. If you have the will to seek, God's favor, then whenever something is presented to you, then your attitude ought to be, okay, wow, I accept it. Thank you, Elena. Anybody else? He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory, but he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. Again, Jesus is just affirming that, he's not preaching and teaching, for his own glory. He's saying and doing what the Father sent him to do. The glory is going to go to the Father. Did not Moses give you the law, yet none of you keeps the law? Why do you seek to kill me?
I kind of think it's interesting. They deny that they're seeking to kill him, while all along they're seeking to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah, because listen to what they say. You have a demon who is seeking to kill you. So I should have mentioned this, I guess. Some said he was a good man. Remember that? Did we read that in about verse 12 or so? No, maybe. Verse 12. Some said he was a deceiver. So here we have that he's a demon. He has a demon.
Today would say you're crazy.
Yeah.
Who's trying to kill you?
Another place, I can't recall right now, where it says it, but some say, in another place he says, we were not born of fornication. What were they saying then?
But they were Jews.
They were saying of Jesus, you're illegitimate. Why would they say that? Jill, was you saying?
He was virgin born.
Okay.
They didn't believe that.
They knew there was something kind of weird about his birth, apparently. Tales had gone back, about how Jesus was born. And so again, they throw it out. We're not a fornication. And then another place they say, why, you're a Samaritan. You see, again, it's a criticism or a labeling, of him. So slander, he had that frequently, did he not? Okay. I did one work and you all marvel. All right, what's the one work? Verse 21. I did one work. Now he's done many works all the way back to chapter 2. You remember the Bible says, is the imperfect tense, he was doing miracles, in Jerusalem. Nicodemus saw those, and then he had, interview with Jesus in chapter 3. So what does he mean when he says, then I did one work?
Feeding of 5,000.
The lame man. That's what it was, specifically, the lame man. I did one work, and you all marvel. Moses therefore gave you circumcision, not that it was from Moses, but from the fathers, and you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses should not be broken, are you angry with me because I made a man completely well on the Sabbath? Don't judge according to appearance. Judge righteous judgment. Boy, he's laying it on them here, isn't he? All right. Now, so in short, what Jesus is saying here is this. You criticize me. You remember in the lame man, there were two things that they were upset with Jesus about. Number one, that he did his one work on what? On the Sabbath. What was the second criticism? Told him to rise, take up your bed, and walk. And that was forbidden by their, those 39 articles or whatever I pointed out to you, of transferring from one place to another. Okay? All right, so what's he saying? He is saying that the law requires circumcision on the 8th day. Okay, and you guys do that on the 8th day in spite of the fact that circumcising would be an act of work. And so you do that on the 8th day, and all of you guys are okay with it, and it is okay And yet I make a man who's been lame for 38 years, able to walk, and y'all take exception to it. Is class over? Well, all right. I want to finish this chapter next week. What are you going to say? I'm a deceiver?
You have a demon.
I haven't. Well, they told me I didn't have to be in a hurry. I want to hit the highlights. All right. Thank y'all so much. I enjoyed it.